Good evening, everyone. Thanks for listening to a few thoughts I wanted to share. I've had a lot of family, along with friends from inside the US and even some outside, who've asked me in the last week what I think about the impact of the coronavirus on the economy, on the state of politics, and many other things. And it's a really difficult thing to answer with a one-sentence text. So I wanted to try another channel of expressing my thoughts here. I'm not attempting to give investment advice, or I'm not really interested in discussing partisan politics, but just wanted to give you my opinions of what I've read and think I understand about what lies ahead. I think as testing becomes much more available in the next week, and apparently from everything I've read and heard, the next 2 weeks, many people are going to be tested that were not able to be tested previously. I expect we'll see a significant spike in the number of cases, and by significant, I mean nationwide. I would expect within 2 weeks, somewhere between 5 and 10 times the cases we have today. I think we are going to have to take pretty bold steps, and some have been taken already. Last week, or on last Friday, President Trump issued a state of emergency, a nationwide state of emergency, which is a good first step. You've seen the Fed do some pretty unprecedented things earlier in the month, and then again today, and today is Sunday afternoon. But I think I want to share with you kind of what I think the next 3 things that will happen that will hopefully start to where we'll start to see cases of this plateau. First, I think in the next week, we'll see all public schools, universities, parks, any sort of government-funded building, employees will ultimately be told to stay at home. I expect that to happen pretty soon, and it's already happened in many of the states. Interestingly enough, I read that Indiana is one of the last states not to suspend public schools, even though every state around it, every border state has already done so. So I think there's going to be some pressure to certainly do that. Just today in New York City, the Mayor de Blasio, has decided to close the school system in New York. And why is that important? It's hugely important because it's the largest in the country. There's over 1 million students in the school district. And the concern all along had been, obviously everyone wants to stop the spread of this, but the next step from this is when you send 1 million students home, some of them are younger students that are going to need care. And if that care requires a parent to stay at home, then that's one more person that's not able to work. And the fear from this is that not only will we see significant concerns with ongoing cases, but if people have to step away from work and they can't sustain a salary or their job, it becomes a bigger problem. In New York, I think the issue is magnified even more because, as I said, there are 1 million students here. Many of those students, when they're enrolled in school, it's the only meal that they receive per day that they can count on. And there's some real fears that if people step away, if students step away from the school system, they may not be able to receive that one meal a day. I know folks are working on trying to solve that, but that's a big problem. But I think we're already seeing this happen. I expect within a week, we're going to see the total shutdown of school systems and any sort of government or public university. Within a week, I expect that as we start seeing more tests, as I mentioned earlier, testing is going to become more available, that we are going to see an obvious spike in the cases, and we're going to continue to see, unfortunately and very sadly, an increased number of deaths. I think that's going to lead to the next step, which is that the president will take the next step, which is to basically start a domestic travel ban. So there'll be no flights within the U.S. I think what I would expect to see is that markets are going to continue to pressure him to make big, bold steps. I expect this week that markets are not going to be kind to investors, but I think as we continue to make these steps, we're getting closer to a solution. No flights. When I say all travel, no flights, no trains. We've already stopped cruises, thankfully, from continuing. Obviously, the impact of the economy here is going to be very significant. Within 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, I suspect that there will be some sort of nationwide quarantine. And what I mean by that is if you are able to work from home, if you're not a hospital employee, if you're not a critically needed employee at your office, you're going to be asked to work from home. That's going to have to be something done nationwide. If you look at what's just happened this weekend, I'll tell you why I think this is important. If we look at the data in South Korea rolled out a massive number of tests. Hundreds of thousands of people were tested. The cases spiked, and now there's only about 35 new cases per day. And that's a system that everyone is trying to emulate. Italy is what everyone is trying to avoid. The northern part of Italy is just seeing a massive amount of cases and deaths. I think there were 350 new deaths today. What they've done is be very slow to respond to the crisis. And testing was slow. They didn't cut off travel. And what we're seeing now is like 1,500 new cases over the weekend. And I think the number again is like 350 deaths. So they were about 2 to 3 weeks behind everyone else. And you can see the impact that's had on how this is spreading and how it's been such a deadly pandemic in that country. I think that we're going to all be asked to make sacrifices during that point. It's not fun to sit in your house. The gym will probably close. Restaurants will close. Movie theaters will close. Already in New York, already the CDC today has recommended that any event that has more than 50 people be suspended. I think we'll see that continue. So those are kind of my three predictions. And I just want to talk for one moment about why I think this is going to happen. So I mentioned before, Trump has made some steps in the last several days. I think we were very slow to respond to the crisis. Trump came out on February 26th. I'll quote him here, and he said that the level that we've had in our country is very low, and those people are getting better. The total is 15, and in a couple of days we'll be down to 0. Just 2 days later, he said again while on camera, it's going to disappear. One day, like a miracle, it will disappear. That was amazingly the message that he gave the entire country, and I think his hope was to calm the country. But I'll tell you, I don't think the reactions of the markets certainly viewed that as calming. The next day, markets certainly disagreed and fell dramatically the day after his most recent speech. I think it was the biggest one-day drop ever. And then we had, as I mentioned last week, just 14 days later, Trump declares a national emergency, which tells us that there's been some mixed messages here. How do you respond to this if you're the Fed? And for those of you that aren't in finance, I'll try to speak to this in simple terms, but the Fed typically during a crisis like the financial crisis or during 9/11 lowered interest rates to stimulate the economy, to stimulate borrowing, to solidify small business. And ultimately, that had a very positive impact over time. Just in the past couple years, the Fed has tried to reverse that track and pull us back into a more normal interest rate pattern where we're not close to 1.5%. So the Fed responded on March 3rd. Again, this is 4 days after Trump's comment about coronavirus hopefully disappearing, with an unexpected rate cut of 50 basis points. So that was expected to rally the markets, and that didn't happen. The markets rallied for about an hour, and that day we saw markets down again over 1,000 points. The Dow was down over 1,000 points. The other thing that you can look at is how have the markets responded since that Fed rate cut. The S&P was down almost 15% since the Fed took that action. So you can tell that the markets have not been calmed at all by that action. And then just today, the Fed dropped interest rates by another 100 basis points. So that's pretty much the Fed's now used almost all of the interest rate cuts that they have because this puts rates close to 0. And again, if we look at how the markets are handling this, already tomorrow, if I look at the data, it looks like the markets are expected to close again almost down 1,200 points, the Dow, almost down 1,200 points at the open. So the markets have not responded well to this either. And part of the issue is that lower rates can't stop the spread of a virus. The only thing we can do is to increase the number of testing facilities or speed up the tests that are available to the general public. We're going to have a nationwide quarantine that's going to be very painful for everyone, painful for the economy. But that is when I expect that we'll see the number of cases begin to plateau within just a few weeks of that. Fortunately, the timing of this is also close to the beginning of the summer. Viruses normally don't continue to spread as well as they normally do during the summer, and we're hoping that happens here. No guarantee, but that's the hope. We're going to have some pain in our personal lives. It's going to be inconvenient, and there are going to be, unfortunately, a lot of people who get sick from this. So that's really my thought here. I wanted to share that. Happy to send over a note and best wishes to all of you.